I walked back onto that street thinking I was finally done with war, done with rules that mattered, ready for the kind of quiet you only appreciate after you've lived in places where quiet doesn't exist. Sun on the asphalt, sprinkler hiss in the distance, the smell of cut grass in the heat. It felt almost fake after months overseas. My dad, Ray Dalton, retired Marine Master Sergeant, was waiting on the porch like he always did, arms crossed, posture still straight enough to scare gravity. He didn't do big hugs. He just gave me that small nod he'd given me my whole life, the one that meant everything without saying a word. I nodded back, and for a minute I let myself think, yeah, maybe this is where life resets. To the right of the front door, beside the flagpole, was the display case my dad built while I was gone. Dark walnut frame, thick glass, lit from inside. My dress blues hung in there like a museum piece. The jacket was pressed sharp, buttons shining, ribbons aligned perfectly, metals catching the light. It wasn't vanity. It was memory. I earned those blues in a place where you don't earn anything unless someone else pays part of the bill. When I'd left for deployment, my mom was still alive. When I came home the first time after her funeral, I wore those same blues to stand beside my father in a graveyard and pretend I was steady. That uniform has been at weddings, funerals, promotions, and phone calls I wish I could delete from my brain. It isn't fabric to me. It's a promise. My dad insisted on putting it out front. People should see what service looks like, he'd texted me. Not for pride. For respect. I believed him. That belief lasted exactly one day. The next afternoon, I walked into the kitchen and found Dad staring at a letter like it had insulted him out loud. He handed it over, face set calm in that dangerous way Marines get when they're pissed, but still choosing discipline. It was from our homeowners association. Pine Brook Estates, or whatever polished name they've slapped on the entrance sign now. The letter said our front porch display violated community standards. Military uniform exhibitions are not in alignment with approved exterior decor. Remove within 72 hours to avoid fines. Signed by the HOA president, a woman named Lila Harrow. I didn't know her yet, but my dad's expression told me everything. Eyesore. I read out loud, because that word was in there too. They called it an eyesore. Dad gave a short laugh, no humor in it. That woman thinks she runs a kingdom instead of a cul-de-sac, he said. Don't worry about it, son. Paper tyrants always want something to feel big about. He crumpled the letter and dropped it in the trash like it was nothing. I tried to match his calm, but something in my stomach tightened. I've dealt with a lot of enemies in my life. None of them ever hid behind pastel stationery. 2 days later we got the second notice. Same cream envelope, same cold font, but this time it came with a demand. Remove within 48 hours. Penalties commence at $200 per day. When Dad read it, that little laugh was gone. His jaw set hard. He didn't crumple it. He laid it on the table like it weighed 100 pounds. They can send all the paper they want, he said quietly, and I knew that tone, the one that's right before a fight begins. That uniform stays where it is. I felt proud for a second, then worried right after. Because I'd seen men like Lila Harrow before. Different uniform, same hunger. People who need control like oxygen don't stop when you ignore them. They escalate. We spent the next day trying to settle into normal life. I unpacked. I slept too long. I tried not to replay old images in my head. Dad worked in the garage, tinkering with something, pretending this HOA nonsense deserved zero attention. The blues stayed in their case, shining on the porch like a quiet dare. Then the smell hit me. It wasn't wood smoke. It was chemical, sharp, wrong. It pulled me out of sleep like an alarm. I heard my dad's footsteps already downstairs. I bolted after him, hard in my throat. The front door was open. Dad stood frozen on the porch, staring into the yard. I stepped beside him, and everything in me went cold. The display case was shattered, glass scattered like ice on the tiles. On the lawn was a blackened pile, still smoking. The deep blue will reduce to ash. Brass buttons warped from heat. Little ribbons curled and melted. My uniform. Our flag was on the ground too, crumpled and dirty, like someone had stepped on it just to prove they could. For a second I couldn't breathe. Then the rage came, but not loud rage. The slow, glacial kind. Dad? I whispered, because my voice wasn't mine anymore. Who did this? He didn't look at me. They burned it, he said, for flat words. Then he turned and walked inside without another syllable. I followed him into his office, the smoke smell sticking to my skin like a stain. He clicked the security footage up. Grainy black and white. 3:07 a.m. Two figures walking up our drive. No masks. No rush. Lila Harrow in a long coat. Hair tied back tight. Moving like she owned the night. Behind her was the HOA enforcer, a guy I'd never met called Brett Walsh. Big shoulders, clipboard type who liked being important. He smashed the case with a crowbar. She pulled the uniform out like trash. Then she poured lighter fluid on it. Struck a match. Stood there watching it burn. Before they left, Lila bent down and stomped on the flag. Like a signature. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. It wasn't vandalism to me. It was desecration. You don't have to love the military to understand that burning someone's uniform is beyond petty. It's personal. It's calculated. It's a declaration. My dad turned to me. I steal. They didn't just cross a line, he said. They jumped it smiling. As if on cue, the mail slot clattered. Another letter. Another fine. This time for improper waste disposal and lawn damage. They fined us for the ashes of the uniform they burned. I felt something in my chest tighten, so hard it almost hurt. Dad didn't even pretend to be surprised. They're trying to bury what they did under paperwork, he said. Make you feel like you're the problem. I clenched that fine notice until it ripped. They picked the wrong house, I said. Dad put a hand on my shoulder, heavy and steady. They picked the wrong core. We didn't talk much after that. We cleaned up glass, gathered every scrap of ash like it was a fallen brother. We hoisted the flag back up, washed it, folded it right, and hung it higher. We left the burned patch of lawn visible. Not because we wanted sympathy. Because we weren't hiding anything. By noon the story was already moving. You don't live in a neighborhood that quiet and do something that loud without people noticing. A Vietnam vet from down the block showed up first. Old pickup, USMC sticker faded on the tailgate. He didn't say much. He just shook my dad's hand and looked at the scorch mark like he was paying respects. Then more came. Gulf War guys. Retired Navy chiefs. A couple younger Marines I didn't even know lived nearby. They stood with us on the porch, quiet. Not a protest, more like a promise. Someone uploaded the footage. I still don't know who. But it went everywhere. Local pages, then veteran forums, then national news. Overnight my phone turned into a siren. Brothers from my platoon, guys I hadn't heard from in years, all saying the same thing. Say the word. We're coming. She doesn't get to do that and walk away. The next morning I woke to engines outside. Not one or two. A line. Trucks, jeeps, motorcycles, parked neatly along our curb. And then they stepped out. Marines. Some active duty in camis. Some veterans in jackets full of patches. A few in dress blues, crisp and perfect, like they'd put them on as a statement. They didn't chant. They didn't scream. They just lined up shoulder to shoulder in silent formation facing our house. It was the loudest quiet I've ever heard. Cameras showed up soon after, because of course they did. Lila Harrow finally got her visual impact. She just didn't like what it said. She called the cops, trying to frame this as harassment. 2 patrol cars rolled in slow, officers uneasy when they realized what they were looking at. A master gunnery sergeant walked over, calm as a sermon, explained they were peacefully assembled on public property, no threats, no disorder. The officers looked around at the cameras, the neighbors gathering, the line of Marines that wasn't moving. They nodded, got back in their cars, and left. Lila's power play fizzled on live TV. That afternoon, Colonel James Reddick, retired, called me. I'd never met him, but I knew the name. A legend. He didn't waste words. Son, what they did is unacceptable. You don't start a fight with the Marine Corps and expect to win. Within hours, he had veteran attorneys in motion, former JAG officers working pro bono. They filed suit against the HOA and against Lila personally. Property destruction, civil harassment, emotional distress, and the one that made Lila's lawyer choke when it hit his desk, federal violation of protections tied to military service and discrimination against service members. The media dug deeper too, and that's when the real rot came out. Turns out Lila wasn't just a petty HOA queen. She'd been running that board like a racket for years. Selective fines, intimidation, shady contracts tied to her friends. 3 days later, the state attorney general announced a formal investigation into the HOA for corruption and abuse. You could feel the neighborhood exhale like it had been holding its breath for a long time. The board members started resigning one by one. Suddenly nobody knew what Lila was doing, nobody approved her actions, everybody wanted distance. She was alone fast. At the emergency homeowner meeting, The vote to remove her wasn't even close. People described her meltdown inside like a storm finally breaking. Threats, screaming, blaming everyone else. Then she signed her resignation papers with a shaking hand and stormed out. When she walked into the parking lot, she froze. Not because anyone yelled at her. Because across the curb stood a handful of Marines in dress blues, silent, watching. The honor she tried to burn, standing alive in front of her. She lowered her head and hurried to her car, leaving like a thief in daylight. After that, the HOA collapsed. Lawsuits, investigations, and the homeowner's own disgust killed it. They voted to dissolve the whole thing within weeks. Lila vanished into legal trouble and silence. The street got quieter again, but in a better way. A month later, Colonel Reddick visited. He handed me a garment bag. Inside was a new set of blues, tailored perfectly. I opened the lining and felt my throat close up. Names were stitched inside in small gold thread, the names of the guys from my unit who didn't make it home. The Corps takes care of its own, the colonel said. When I put that uniform on later, it didn't feel like replacing something. It felt like carrying them with me again. Here's the part that still blows my mind. What happened on our porch didn't just end in a neighborhood win. It sparked a bigger fire. Lawmakers got involved. Veterans groups pushed hard. Within months, our state passed a military honor protection law that blocks HOAs from banning displays of service, flags, uniforms, memorials. Not because of me alone, but because this story cracked something open and people finally said, enough. So I'm asking you this. Was Lila Harrow just enforcing rules, or was she a bully hiding behind aesthetics to shame what she didn't respect? And what would you have done if someone burned something that represented your family's sacrifice? Drop your take in the comments. I want to hear where you stand, because I guarantee you've seen some version of this kind of power trip in your own life. If this story hit you, hit like so more people see it. Subscribe for more real-life battles where ordinary people push back against petty tyranny. And remember this, respect isn't decoration. It's a line. And when someone crosses it, they're not just dealing with you anymore.